topic of this program is entomology and insects. First, we'll find out the main morphological characteristics of insects. Then we're going to introduce you to two very familiar varieties of insects, bees and stinging insects. There are 800,000 known species of insects. You heard right, 800,000, and thousands of new ones are discovered every year. Insects can live just about anywhere, in our homes, the forests and swamps, in the deserts. Some even accompany warm-blooded animals as far as the polar regions. The reason insects are as adaptable as they are is that they are the oldest of all the species to inhabit the Earth. They appeared at least 300 million years ago, long before reptiles and mammals. Insects have very special features, and I'll tell you about them right now. Insects are inconspicuous, and yet they can be found all over the world. Insects alone account for 4/5 of all the living species in the world. Their shapes, colors, and lifestyles vary almost ad infinitum. Insects can be found in almost every habitat on Earth, from the poles to the equator. They owe their extraordinary adaptability to the way their bodies are structured, quite differently from mammals and humans. For instance, insects do not have an inner skeleton, but an outer skeleton called exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is composed of two highly resistant substances, chitin and sclerotin. It protects insects from their enemies and prevents water loss. The exoskeleton is hard. Some insects, like grasshoppers, grow continually and must therefore get rid of their outer shells periodically. After the old one has been shed, the new exoskeleton takes a few hours to become hard again. During this time, the insect is vulnerable to outside dangers. In spite of their many different shapes, insects all have the same basic body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. The head of an insect has mouth parts which enable it to seize and ingest food. The mouth parts are perfectly suited to each insect's diet. For example, the black fly's mouth parts, which are called stinging mouth parts, have mandibles that pierce skin and an elongated organ to suck blood. On the other hand, Coleopteran's mouth parts, called grinders, have powerful mandibles that cut through solid foods. Insects' primary sensory organs, antennae and eyes, are on their head. In a way, the antennae are their organs of smell. Constantly moving, antennae can detect the presence of food, sexual partners, or danger several kilometers away. Insects' eyes have little in common with the eyes of the superior animals. They are made up of thousands of hexagonal facets. Each facet is a visual organ in itself. The visual impressions received by every one of these elementary eyes are combined by the insect's brain to form one image. Compound eyes create rather fuzzy images, somewhat like a mosaic. However, compound eyes are extremely sensitive to movement, a major advantage for insects trying to flee a predator or about to catch a prey. The thorax midsection is the insect's center of locomotion. Attached to the thorax are the insect's wings and legs. Insects always have 6 legs. Equipped with numerous joints, their legs are able to make highly coordinated and fast movements. Depending on the species, their legs enable them to walk, jump, swim, or capture prey. Most insects have 1 or 2 pairs of wings controlled by powerful muscles. Through the wings run veins in which air circulates, giving them their rigidity and lightness. Sometimes the wings are modified to perform other functions than flying. For example, they may have the form of a case the insect can wrap around itself for protection. The third part of an insect's body is the abdomen, which contains the reproductive organs. In females, the abdomen has a pouch-shaped organ called spermatheca. It's in this receptacle that male insects deposit their sperm. Mating with a single male can provide the female with enough sperm to last a lifetime. The laying of eggs is the first phase of the insect life cycle. In many species, the young insect looks nothing like the adult insect. Wingless, its sole function is to feed itself. When the larva finishes growing, it weaves itself a silk cocoon. Inside its cocoon, the larva ceases to move and becomes a chrysalis. The insect's tissues then reorganize themselves completely. A few days later, an adult insect emerges from the chrysalis's dried-out envelope. Scientists are still very much intrigued by metamorphosis. They believe that insect larvae possess small islands of cells of the adult insect, in addition to larval cells which make up most of its body. Once the larva is fully developed, hormones trigger off both the multiplication of the adult cells and the decline of the larval cells. Insects are endowed with remarkable adaptability. They are able to adapt rapidly to changes in their conditions of life. These amazing organisms preceded us on Earth, and they may well survive us. As a species, insects are wonderfully adapted to their environment, but as individuals, they're not very adaptable. Through countless generations, they always respond in the same way to the same stimulus and repeat the same operations over and over in the same order. They are incapable of learning anything from a new experience. But their instinct, so remarkably adapted to their survival needs, is impressive. And the domestic bee certainly deserves special mention. A beehive is a city of 70,000 inhabitants. From birth, bees contribute to their society and carry out their work in perfect harmony without ever having had to learn it. The organization of a beehive is a marvel of community life and productivity. The world of insects is governed by the everyone for himself rule. Indeed, except when it comes to reproduction, the various individuals of a same species are born, live, and die alone, without establishing ties among themselves. But there are exceptions to this rule: social insects. For thousands upon thousands of years, bees have been constructing extraordinarily complex societies. Like in human societies, the key to a hive's success is the distribution of work and a certain hierarchy within the community. The distribution and hierarchy are based on the existence of tens of thousands of worker bees, ruled by a queen bee. The queen bee is about twice as big as the worker bee. Without her, the beehive would collapse into disarray. She secretes an odorous substance called pheromone, which encourages the workers to fulfill their duties. But the queen bee's main role is to ensure reproduction of the species and the growth of the colony. So she is constantly busy laying eggs in the nest's empty cells. Like their queen, worker bees are also female. However, they are sterile. While they cannot reproduce, they perform a great many tasks. For instance, during the 10 first days of their life, worker bees are in charge of the larvae. They can do this thanks to special feeding glands they develop during those first days. The glands secrete a liquid called royal jelly, which they feed to the larvae. Most of the larvae only receive a small portion of the royal jelly and turn into workers. However, some larvae raised in special cells are fed only on royal jelly. This diet builds genital organs in the larvae and makes them double in size. That's how queen bees are born. Around the 10th day, a worker's feeding glands shrink up. However, other glands situated under her abdomen begin to grow, the wax glands. Using the secretions from these glands, the worker bees busy themselves building the beehive cells. They will be used both to store food and raise larvae. During this time, the worker bee also guards the hive. She will stand at the entrance of the hive and, with her barbed stinger, sting any enemy who ventures close or tries to enter the hive. It is only in the 3rd and 4th stages of her life that the worker bee leaves the hive to gather nectar. She flies off to look for 2 different types of food, pollen and nectar. Pollen is a fine dust produced by flower stamens. High in proteins, it enables the larvae to grow. The workers gather it into little balls they glue to their hind legs. Nectar, a sweet liquid, is secreted by flower corolla. The bees suck it up with their mobile proboscis and swallow it. When they return to the nest, the workers regurgitate the nectar. Some of the water in it evaporates. This is how they convert the nectar into honey. Energy-rich honey feeds the entire colony. For centuries, apiculturists have developed ingenious ways to exploit the work of bees. Using removable cards on which worker bees build their cells, apiculturists are able to handle the hive and its inhabitants more easily. A centrifugation process is used to extract the honey from the honeycomb. Researchers are constantly working to improve apicultural techniques. For one, they are trying to select the most productive, manageable, and cold and disease-resistant colonies of bees. To do this, for example, they place photoelectric cells at the entrance of the hives, which enable them to assess the activity of various colonies in relation to the quantity of honey they produce. This technique enables them to select the colonies which are the most effective in terms of gathering food. By grafting eggs into cupules, small plastic capsules containing royal jelly, first they introduce the royal jelly, then deposit the eggs to be grafted. Researchers are also able to constitute veritable queen bee banks. The queen bees are then implanted into beehives, where their productivity and genetic qualities can be assessed. The usefulness of bees is not limited to the production of honey. These industrious little beings, together with many other insects, play an essential role in the pollination of flowers and the growth of fruits. Without them, nature would be very different from what it is.
Useful or pests? No one questions the usefulness of bees, and many other insects are essential to pollination or play an important role in the food chain. However, some varieties of insects are outright pests. Just think about the grasshoppers that can devastate whole crops, or some insects that ravage forests. And what about all those stinging insects that prey on humans as well as animals? For a long time, toxic pesticides were used to get rid of insect pests. But today, researchers are developing new weapons, ones that will respect the environment.
Man lives in harmony with most of the many insects that inhabit the earth. But some thousands of species, referred to as insect pests, spoil this happy arrangement. Every summer, a humming scourge descends upon the temperate and boreal forests of the world, stinging insects.
These insects, which include mosquitoes, black flies, and several others, belong to the Diptera group. Stinging dipterans have the unsavory habit of sucking animal and human blood in order to reproduce. In stinging dipterans, the females are the only ones to feed on blood. The males play a role in the species' reproduction, but they are always harmless since they live off the nectar of flowers. But the females depend on blood for the protein they need to make their eggs. To locate their prey, female dipterans are able to detect the carbon dioxide in their prey's breathing. They can follow a trail over long distances. On approaching their host, they also recognize it from the heat and humidity it radiates, and from its shape, posture, and color. Once it has spotted its prey, the insect alights on it and its mouth parts go into action. For example, the black fly pierces the skin with its mandibles. It then injects saliva into the wound. The saliva contains anticoagulating substances which make the blood flow freely. The blood is then sucked up by the insect. The insect may grow twice or even thrice its size after a single meal of blood. Eggs develop within days due to the proteins provided by the blood. The insect will then look for a suitable place to lay its eggs, that is, a stream or river if it's a black fly, or an expanse of stagnant water if it's a mosquito. Bites from dipterous insects are not dangerous per se, but these insects are a nuisance. The saliva they inject when they sting is allergenic. It irritates the skin and causes itching. By changing the courses of natural waterways, man often encourages the proliferation of these insects. Their vast numbers can prevent people from working outdoors or enjoying outdoor activities. But there is worse. In tropical countries, stinging dipterans carry pathogenic agents and can transmit them to humans. Throughout the world, hundreds of millions of people suffer from these severe diseases: yellow fever, malaria, onchocerciasis, sleeping sickness, among others. Researchers are, however, developing ways to fight these insects. One of the promising ones is a biological insecticide, Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. This bacteria produces small crystals composed of proteins, some of which are highly toxic for insect larvae. When absorbed by an insect larva, the protein destroys its digestive tract, thereby preventing it from eating. The insect larva then dies of hunger. Scientists have isolated a BT colony, BTI, which only affects dipterans. BTI is a powerful weapon against these insects. Dipteran larvae feed by filtering microorganisms and matters in suspension in water. If BTI crystals are put into water where insect larvae are growing, the latter quickly absorb the toxic agent and die. This biological insecticide is already widely used and poses no threat to the environment. Nor does it affect other insects or aquatic animals, whereas chemical insecticides kill insects indiscriminately. Treating all bodies of water in a given area with BTI will virtually wipe out its population of black flies, one of the most voracious dipterans in northern regions. Researchers are also exploring another way to reduce stinging insect populations: pheromones. These odorous substances are naturally secreted by dipteran larvae. Normally, pheromones secreted by the larvae guide the females to the most suitable egg-laying spots. If it were possible to imbue sites inappropriate for larvae growth with these pheromones, it might prevent the insects from multiplying. Stinging insects are being successfully wiped out in several regions of the world. But will this not threaten the ecological balance of these areas? Oddly enough, scientists do not think so. For sure, mosquitoes, black flies, and other stinging insects feed numerous living organisms, but they do not seem to constitute a major part of their diet. Still, we may wonder why nature would keep such enormous populations of insects alive if she could do without them. Every segment of an insect's body is controlled by a series of ganglia. In fact, each segment reacts independently and by reflex without receiving any orders from the brain, to the point that a decapitated insect can live for several days before dying of exhaustion. If you have ever observed a headless insect thrashing its legs about or trying to fly, don't worry, it's not an illusion.